And hold onto your knees. Just lift up into the chest. Just look down at the floor. Spend a moment to observe how the physical body feels for you right now. Observe what it would be nice to do in terms of your practice. Setting yourself an intention. So just observe how the body is feeling and where it would be nice to open, where it would be nice to extend, where it would be nice to soften. So right from the start, just spend a moment to observe how your body is feeling at this moment in time, drawing your attention into the present. Drawing your attention and your intention to the present. So whether you struggle to get out of bed and to get here, but you got here, whether you're full of energy raring to go, just observe how the body and the mind and the breath are feeling at this precise moment in time. And then release the knees and bring the hand into Namaste. Lengthen from the armpits into the elbows, from the elbows into the heels of the hands, from the heels of the hands into the fingertips. And with an exhalation, allow your eyes to gently close. Just listening to the sound of the breath as it enters and as it exits. Just very gently draw your chin down to meet your chest. Spend a moment to seek to generate a genuine, heartfelt sense of gratitude for something or someone or somewhere. Hold on to that feeling of abundance in the heart area, and then release the backs of your hands down toward your knees, palms facing upwards. And then raise your head, allow your eyes to softly open, the focus to softly come back. Hold on to your knees and lift the chest, drive the chest upwards. Spend a moment just feeling that you can elevate the chest up to the ceiling, drawing your shoulders down away from your ears. Take a deep inhalation in through the nose. And then with an exhalation, turn to your right side, drawing your abdomen across, your ribs across, your shoulders across. Drawing your abdomen from the left to the right, drawing your ribs and your shoulders from the left to the right, but keeping your neck just totally soft, looking forward. And then come back to the center, lift up into the chest, drive the chest upwards, take a deep inhalation in through the nose. And then turn to the left side, drawing your abdomen across your ribs, across your shoulders, across. Breathing evenly and deeply listening to the sound of the breath. And then come back to the center. Just come off your lift and then sit back on your heels for a moment. Just sitting back on your heels, just observe the feeling in the chest, the feeling in the arms and in the legs. Just feel how the legs can just sandwich together, how gravity can draw your shins into the mat. But it needs a little bit of encouragement because maybe the bottom of the shin doesn't connect with the floor very easily. If you're on a soft floor, like a carpeted floor, then maybe your shins make really good contact with the floor already. If you're on a hard floor, then chances are you have to work a little bit harder to draw your shins into the floor. So just really observe the connection with the ground, how that affects the connection with the shins. Lift up into the chest, drive the chest up towards the ceiling. And then keeping your back totally straight, hinge at the hips. Keep the front chest elevating from the abdomen to the diaphragm, to the collarbone, to the chin. Coming forwards a little bit at a time. Pushing your hands really firmly into the floor. Aiming to keep your seat bones down on your heels. As you come forwards, keeping the front chest lifted. Extending into the arms really deeply. Spreading the fingers. Spreading the palms. Maintaining that connection of the shins into the floor, really working to press the shins down. It feels different now that your weight isn't on your legs. Pressing the shins down feels perhaps like there's more effort involved, but keep that effort engaged. Breathing evenly and deeply, listening to the sound of the breath. Breathing into the shins. Long, slow, deep, deliberate in-breaths. Long, slow, deep, deliberate out-breaths. Pressing the seat bones downwards towards the heels. Trying to keep the seat bones in contact with the heels. If they have parted company a little, then bring the hands a bit closer to the body. And then really straighten your arms so that you can sit the heels down sit the seat bones down onto the heels. Lift your head and then keep your right hand where it is. Thread the left hand underneath the right hand so that your left shoulder comes down onto the floor, your head comes down onto the floor. And then press your left arm firmly into the floor and roll your chest down to face the floor so that you really open up in the shoulder blade region. So keeping that left arm really activated, keeping the right arm really activated, rolling the chest down to meet the floor. And then stretch both arms away, just stretching back into Adho Mukha virasana again, and then lifting the head, threading the right arm underneath the left arm, so the right arm is directly at kind of 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whichever. Or no, not 9 o'clock. Yeah, 9 o'clock. Press the left hand into the floor and then roll the chest into the ground. Breathing evenly. Listening to the sound of the breath. Opening up the shoulder blade region. Okay, and then stretch your arms away. Just come back into Adho Virasana. And then come up onto your knees. Turn your toes under and come up into dog down. Breathing evenly and deeply. Bending your knees every now and then just to activate the shoulder blade region a little more deeply. And then re-straightening the legs, pressing the fronts of the knees through to the backs of the knees, pressing the fronts of the thighs through to the backs of the thighs, pressing the fronts of the shins through to the backs of the shins, turning the fronts of the legs inwards from the little toe to the big toe side, so the backs of the thighs broaden outwards. Just observe your energy. Observe that there's evenness of energy, like we were focusing on last week. Evenness of energy, evenness of activation. Step your feet forwards, come up into standing position, and then have your feet as wide apart as your mat. And then have blocks for your hands if there's any problems with your back. So you're going to half Uttanasana if you're protecting your back. Otherwise, we're going to go into full Uttanasana. So half Uttanasana, you come forwards with the hands on blocks, extending the chin and the chest forwards. Full Uttanasana is where your arms are interlocked. So where everyone raise your arms up. Really activate your legs. Really keep your focus on those evenly activated legs. And then bring the thumb into the crease of the elbows. Wrap your fingers around your elbows. Extend your elbows up to the ceiling. And then hinge at the hips. Come forwards, hinging at the hips. And then let the top of the body hang down. Hit the shins back so that your weight goes into the heels. Lift the shins out of the ankle socket up into the kneecap up into the thighs up into the hip socket. If you're in half Uttanasana, work to extend the spine. If you're in full Uttanasana, work to extend the spine. So just breathing and observing the activation of the pose. Okay, and then gently release your hands down to the floor and then come up into a standing position, bending your knees on the way up if you need to, and then just come up into Tadasana, just lifting up into the chest, just spending a moment in your Tadasana, just feeling how the body is feeling, just listening to the breath. Stretch your arms out in front, interlock the fingers, turn the palms all the way out, and then raise your arms over your head, just stretching out your tiredness. Squeezing the elbows in towards each other, pushing the palms up towards the ceiling. And then release your arms, just swap the interlock of the fingers, turn the palms all the way out again, and then raise your arms over your head. Just taking deep inhalations, deep exhalations. Feeling as though you're growing out of your feet into the legs, into the hips, into the chest, into the arms. And then gently release your arms down. Okay, we're going to do parighasana. So parighasana is the gate pose. So you might already have a soft floor, but you can just fold your mat over a little more. Do this especially if you're on a hard floor, and then have a block on the right side where you're going to be able to reach with your foot. To sit on the folded lift and just have your knees level with the end of your mat, and again just go back to your shins. So have your feet and your knees in line with each other, so it's not virasana. You're not bringing your feet wider apart and then sitting between the feet. You're sitting back on your heels, so your knees and your feet are kind of directly in line with each other. And then push your shins down into the floor. So shin contact is really, really important in this. So it's a bit like trikonasana. There's some similarities to trikonasana, but the shins, when we come up, the shins have to stay down because otherwise we lose the foundation of the pose. So press your shins really consciously. Press the shin bone into the shin skin. So especially observe where your shins don't make very good contact with the floor, and really focus on those regions to press them down into the floor, and then come up onto your knees. Now that alone is probably enough to change the way that the shins make contact with the floor. So for me, I can feel that the shins really lose contact with the kind of ankle part of the shin, and then just come down, sit back down on your heels again. So it's time to really consider how the shins make contact with the floor. Now it's really, like I say, shins are really important. So if you found that your shins lifted off the floor, then give yourself a little bit of extra cushioning underneath your shins, because that will help you to maintain the shin action. So maybe just a folded blanket over the top of your mat, and then again press your shins down into the floor, and then come up and see, can you press the shins down more firmly this time? So hopefully that's a yes. So the knees are in line with the edge of the mat, and then you're going to bring your right leg out to the side like this. Now this hip probably wants to push outwards, but we've got to gently suck this hip in. So there's a slight angle from here to here, so it's not kind of, the hip isn't over the knee, there's a slight angle. So maybe you have to move the block away so the toes are just on. So we don't want to be like kind of like this, but we want that there to be a very slight angle here. So press the shin into the floor. So have you lost the shin? Chances are you possibly have. So press the shin into the floor and then turn this right leg like you would in trikonasana. So from the big toe side to the little toe side. and then lift up into the chest. Keep your left hand on your hip and then slide down to the shin. All the time rotating the abdomen outwards, drawing the top shoulder, this top shoulder towards the back of the room. So we're sliding down the leg. Keep turning that leg so we draw that front leg buttock bone in and then broadening out. And then lift up and then stretch over. The aim is to try and get hold of that big toe with this top hand. We might not be there today, but it's not to do this. We don't want to turn, we want to keep the chest really lifted and open. You can turn the palm to face upwards so that the elbow kind of rests down on the knee and then reach over. But we're not trying to drop the chest. We're trying to keep the chest open. So you get this tremendous stretch along that left side. Pressing that left shin firmly into the floor, turning the chest. Okay, and then gently come back to the center and then bring that right leg in and then sit back down onto your shins. So maybe it doesn't look particularly strenuous, but quite, a fair amount of effort is involved, isn't it? Okay, so let's do the other side. So straighten out your mat on the left side and fold over the right side of your mat. And again, if you used a blanket last time, then use a blanket again. And then just kneel down onto the blanket with your knees in line with the edge of the mat. And then lift up into the chest again, pressing your shins really firmly down into the floor, lifting up into the chest. Just observe, do the side ribs feel subtly different? Do you feel like the left side has got more energy than the right side? Again, don't forget your block for your foot as well. So have that where you're going to be able to reach it. Press the shins into the floor really firmly and then come up onto your knees. Bring the left leg out to the side, keeping that shin of that right leg really firmly into the floor. And then stretch the legs. Stretch that left leg away. Turning this leg like you do in trikonasana. Just do the wrong thing. Turn that leg from the little toe to the big toe side. And then notice that this hip just moves back. This front hip moves back. If you turn this leg really, really consciously, then this front hip moves forward and we open here in the groin. Lift up into the chest. Keep that back shin down on the floor. Keep your right hand on your hip. Turn in the chest as you slide yourself down your leg. Keeping the abdomen open and keeping the top shoulder drawing towards the back of the room. Keeping that right shin pressing firmly down into the floor. So it's not just the knee. Reach up with the hand, reach over, and then maybe turn the palm with that left hand to reach the floor, to reach the ceiling even, and then reach over. Keep turning the chest. Keep turning the leg, turning the chest. And then come back to the center. And then just bring that leg back. Lift up into the chest. And just breathe evenly, listen to the breath. So surprisingly strenuous. And then just come off your lift, just move the blanket and then just come down onto all fours and then come up into dog down. So hands as wide apart as your shoulders, feet as wide apart as your hips. And then just come up into Adho Mukha Svanasana. Just breathing evenly and deeply listening to the breath. Just observe the evenness of action, the evenness of effort. Soften the jaw and the tongue and the throat and the lips. Okay, and then come down onto your knees. Just sit back on your heels, lift up into the chest and just observe your level of energy. Observe those areas that you acknowledged at the beginning, just feeling whether those areas feel more open or more energized. Just listening to the sound of the breath. Good, and then just come into cross legs, have a block either side of the hips for sukhasana. Just hold onto your knees, lift up into the chest, driving the chest upwards, drawing the shoulders down away from your ears. Just take some deep inhalations, filling the lungs evenly on both sides. Filling the lungs evenly, emptying the lungs evenly. And then bring your right hand underneath the right knee. Bring the right elbow down onto the block. And then just like in parighasana, we're turning the chest up to face the ceiling, keeping the left hand on the hip for the moment. And then like in parighasana, where we were really working to press that left shin down into the floor, I want you to lengthen from the armpit down into the hip. But another action that really helps you to keep this left seat bone down, because it probably feels lighter, if you're really honest with yourself, probably feels lighter than the right seat bone. So push the right elbow really hard into the floor, away from the right hip, and then lengthen from that right hip into that left buttock bone. So that left buttock bone feels like it's got foundation. So we're using this right arm pushing away into the left buttock bone to really make the buttock bones feel more even. Lift up into the chest, keep turning the chest, and then reach over like you're doing parsva, but your arm is coming down a little more. So it's that same parsva stretch, but push that right elbow into the floor, lengthen the left buttock bone away from that right elbow, and really turn. Just feel that stretch around latissimus dorsi, around the side ribs. And then bring yourself back to the center. Just hold onto your knees, lift up into the chest, breathe deeply. Soften the jaw and in the tongue and in the throat. And then bring your left hand underneath the left knee, and then bring the elbow down onto the block. And then really broaden and open the chest. So you can pull against this left knee to get greater turn on the chest. Push that left elbow into the floor and push it away from the right hip so that the right hip can really press down firmly. Turning and opening the chest, reaching up with the right hand, and then extending over with that right arm. So keep pushing So keep pulling on that left knee to turn the chest. Keep pushing that left elbow into the floor, lengthening the right hip away from the left elbow so that there's foundation. And then extend over, looking underneath the armpit. Pressing that right seat bone firmly down. The more firmly down that right seat bone is, the more of a stretch you get along that right side of the abdomen. And then come back to the center. Hold onto your knees and lift up into the chest, driving the chest upwards, drawing your shoulders down away from your ears. Just draw the chin down to meet the chest. Lift the chest up to meet the chin. And then draw Mula Bandha into action, drawing the anal sphincter up towards the diaphragm region. So we've got Jalandhara Bandha, the chin into the chest, and Mula Bandha. So just take deep inhalations. Fill in the lungs from the bottom to the top. And allowing the lungs to overflow into the arms and into the chest and into the legs. So maintaining Jalandhara Bandha, separating the hot energy of the solar plexus with the cool energy of the lunar plexus in the brain. Maintaining Mula Bandha so that you hold on to the energy that you create through the breath. Okay, and then release your head, release Mula Bandha, release Jalandhara Bandha, and then just observe the energy in your chest, in your arms and in your legs. Just breathing evenly and deeply. So we're gonna do the camel pose. So again, you'll probably want extra cushioning for underneath your shins. So fold your mat over like I've done, so you've got like an extra thick layer of mat, and then sit back in the same way that you did for the beginning of parighasana. So the knees are in line with each other and the feet are in line with the knees. We're not doing virasana, we're sitting back on our heels. So again, for this pose, we need to press the shins really firmly into the floor. And we've got to try and maintain that action as we go. Let me just quickly show you, because this can be strong for your back. So if you've got, I'm just going to give you some kind of cautions to adhere to. So first of all, just make sure your feet aren't touching, but the feet are in line with the shins, and then you come up onto your shins, and then keep pressing the shins in, and then you bring your hands just onto the buttock area, drawing the elbows together, and then you're lengthening the chest up, and then you're going to slide your hands down to the backs of the thighs. You push the backs of the thighs into the fronts of the thighs, and then lift up into the chest, really broadening and opening the chest. Now, if you've got a bad back, you might just stay at this stage. You might just stay at the previous stage, but this stage probably is the maximum if you've got a bad back. If you don't have a bad back, then you're going to reach back and see if you can find the shins. Now, I'm cheating a little to find the shins. I'm letting my thighs kind of come back towards my feet. But then once you've come into the pose, you got to push those thighs away, lift up into the chest. And then to come out of the pose, you bring your hands into your hips, come up with the chest first, don't poke your head forwards, and then just sit back on your heels, so the camel pose. So just really establish your shins onto the floor. And then the other thing you have to do in this before we go up is breathe, because it's a strenuous pose. And so most people will hold their breath to kind of come into the pose, but then you exhaust yourself. So make sure that you keep a really soft, consistent breath if you can. So push the shins into the floor and then come up onto your knees. Press your knees into the floor, press the fronts of the backs of the thighs into the fronts of the thighs. Bring your hands onto the small of your back and then wing your elbows together, so the buttock area rather than the small of your back actually. So bring your hand into the buttock area. Encourage the buttock skin to draw down towards the backs of your knees and lift up into the chest, really broaden and open the chest. And then if you can, slide your hands down so that they're on the backs of your thighs. Lift up into the chest. And then if you can, reach back. See if you can find your heels. So if you have to hit your shins, your thighs back, then once you've got hold of your shins, then push the shins forwards. Push the shins forwards, broadening and opening the chest. Just listen to the breath. So it's quite strenuous, so just a gentle action, okay. And then bring your hands back into the backs of your legs, lift the chest, and then just bring yourself back down onto the floor. So, fairly strenuous, isn't it? Give me a thumbs up if you thought that was easy, sideways if you thought it was okay, down if you thought it was hard. So there's no thumbs up there, so that's pretty normal, I would say. So it's a strenuous pose, but it's a really good energy pose. So it takes a lot of energy to do it, but you'll feel really kind of energized afterwards. We're going to do it one more time, but just sit back on your heels and just get a feeling of the maybe slightly elevated level of energy that you're at least conscious of, whether you're in full control of it or not. Okay, and then come up onto your shins, having your feet knee width apart, hip width apart, pressing those shins down. Bring your hands into the small of your back, into the buttock area, fingers pointing down, drawing that buttock flesh down towards the backs of the knees, lifting up into the chest, winging the elbows towards each other. And then slide your hands down your back, lifting up into the chest. So it's a back bend. If you can reach down, find your heels, and then push your thighs away, lift up into the chest. Breathe evenly, softly. And then bring your hands into the buttock area, lift the chest first, and then come back and then sit back on your heels. So just come off your folded blanket, folded mat even, and then lay your mat out along the floor and then just sit back on your heels and just come forward into Adho Mukha Virasana, just stretching out your back. But just observe how perhaps your back feels different, how your stretch feels different, how the connection with the seat bones and the heels may feel a little different. Breathe evenly. listening to the breath. And then sit back on your heels and then just come into cross legs or half padmasana, whichever is most doable and comfortable for you. And then just hold on to your knee. Just lift up into the chest. If you need to, then just adjust the buttock flesh so that you're sitting evenly. If you struggle to lift the chest, then sit on a lift. Just breathing evenly and deeply observing the energy within the chest and the arms and the legs and the head. Take a deep inhalation and then turn to the right side. Dig in your back hand deeply into the floor to help maintain the lift of the spine. The more you lift the spine upwards, the more you can turn it. If you find that there's resistance, then sit on a lift. Drawing your abdomen across, your ribs across, your shoulders across. And then come back to the center, lift up into the chest, driving the chest upwards, taking a deep inhalation in through the nose. And then turn to the left. And then come back to the center. So come down onto your back and pull your feet towards you. You can go up to setubandha. If you're not going to do setubandha today, then you can just do viparita karani, just extending your legs up towards the ceiling. Otherwise, just lift the seat bones up off the floor. Gather the shoulder blades together so you come right up onto the tops of the shoulders, and then place the brick in the sacrum area of your back. That's right at the bottom of your back, just above the tailbone. So it's not into the lumbar, it's into right in the kind of tailbone region. Hold on to the edges of the mat. Try and tear the mat apart. Turn the crease of the elbows up to face the ceiling and out to the sides of the room. So you really stay open in the chest. And if you can straighten one leg and then the other, just extending into the legs. Just breathing evenly, keeping the effort even in the two legs. Breathing softly, gently, trying not to let the breath harden. So where you're exerting, it's also important to keep the breath soft, because then you don't tire yourself out. You feed the body full of energy. So even in strenuous poses, like the camel pose, like parighasana, we aim to keep the breath soft and even, so that we bring energy into the body rather than exhaustion. Of course, it's important to understand where you're overworking and then to soften a little. Also observe where you're underworking. exert your effort into those areas. Okay, and then very gently just bend your knees, bring your feet close to the bolster. If you're in Viparita Karani, bend your knees and bring your legs down. Just lift yourself up off the block if you've been in setubandha. So even if you have to come up onto your tiptoes in order to get the space to lift, move the brick out of the way, guide your back down onto the floor. And then pull your knees back into the chest, just stretching out your back, just giving yourself a little massage by rocking from side to side, maybe from top to bottom. Just really stretching out the lower back and just evening out any tension in your spine. And then just rock yourself up into a seated position. Just get your folded blanket for your head, just make sure it feels evenly supported. Just move your equipment out of the way if you can, either side of you. And then come down into a really good straight line, right down the center of your mat if you're wearing glasses. It's nice to take them off. Bring the mat into the shoulders, into the back of the neck. And when you're sure that you're in a good straight line, you close your eyes and allow yourself to release into the floor. So to become motionless requires some effort, letting go of the muscles of the arms and the legs. You have to physically unhook the muscles. Just relaxing the arms and the legs. And when you have relaxed the arms and the legs and the chest and the head, maybe you observe that feeling of lightness that radiates out from the bones into the muscles, into the flesh and into the skin. That feeling of inner lightness. Our extensions and our focus on the physical body and the breath and the mind that is drawn into both the mind and the body. Allow that feeling of lightness to distribute evenly using the breath. Down into the tips of the toes, into the tips of the fingers, into the top of the head. Just basking in that feeling of energetic lightness. And when you're ready to disturb yourself, just wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers. And then bend your knees in toward your chest. Just have a little rock from side to side, from top to bottom, just a gentle grounding massage on the back, just bringing yourself back into the physical body and into the floor, into the room. And then roll onto your right side, just stay down for a breath or two. And then straighten out the top leg, come back up into a seated position, just a final cross legs with your hands in the masti, just a final spinal lift. Just drawing your breath in through the nose and down into the abdomen. Be conscious of the energy that you have released through your practice this morning, that good, positive, healthy flow of clean energy that the extensions and the forward bends and the twists bring to the body and to the mind. And then draw your chin down to meet your chest. Spend a moment to seek, to acknowledge positive energy that you have created inside. And radiate some of that positive energy out into the world. And then release the backs of your hands down toward your knees, palms facing upwards. And as you raise your head, allow your eyes to softly open and the focus to softly come back. Thank you very much. Thank you. So hopefully you feel as though you've really lifted your energy, giving yourself a good old stretch and a good way to get good positive energy to put into your day. So thank you very much for joining me.